You look around in our society, the ones that are really affluent and wealthy and really living life to its fullest are the ones that took risks, right? I'm not saying I'm going to be another Elon Musk or Bill Gates or any of that, but entrepreneurship comes with sort of some ground rules. And one of those rules is you got to have a strong backbone and have faith in yourself.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Courageous Choice. I'm super excited today. We've got Vikram Sood, who has been a mentor of mine almost my whole career. He's the managing director of NuPala, Hospitality Development and Management. NuPala is a full-service destination development and hospitality management company that blends entrepreneurial creativity and financial discipline with environmental and cultural sensitivity to each of its projects. Vikram and I met over 20 years ago. We were part of an opening team for a Four Seasons property here in California. Vikram, I'm so grateful that you're willing to join me today. Thank you for being here.
It's great to have reconnected with you, and I'm excited to do this. It's sometimes fun to talk about the past and look forward into the future, particularly with what's going on with my life and my career right now. So this is great.
I've always looked to you as an amazing leader, and just to share a little, maybe you should put it in your words, share a little bit about the experience that we had in opening Aviara, and because you were probably one of the earliest hires there.
I would
imagine.
Yeah, it's an opening a resort like that is a once in a lifetime experience. I actually had just come off another opening in Hawaii. So I was already half dead to the world, and I got there, and it's funny, my juices were already flowing and the intensity was there, and it felt natural just to go from one transition to the other. But I think what was memorable for me was a few things. One is obviously being back in Southern California to be able to reopen this resort that actually had sat dormant for a number of years due to a very early financial crisis in the 90s. But it was built really like a bunker. It was a solid building, a lot of space, and really something compelling that was going to change the face of, I think, San Diego's luxury scene in general. So that was one part that was really exciting to me. But more importantly was the people. I think that what was fascinating to watch was we had almost over 50 transfers from around the world come and join us for this opening. Some were leadership positions, some were hourly positions. And then there was this great blend of people locally, like yourself, who had never done it before, that said, look, I want to try this. And our goal was to try to open this spectacular luxury resort in a fairly compressed time frame and really execute on day one. And obviously we had a great leader in Chris Huntsberger and the rest of the leadership team. But I think what was magical is how well we worked with each other. And I think that experience in particular, I think fueled my passion and fueled actually my future thoughts as it related to openings and transitions, because I've always remembered, and I think many of us wondered what's going to go wrong today, and it didn't, right? Yeah, we had our moments, but for the most part, I remember ribbon got cut, the doors opened, and yes, people walked in. The sky didn't fall, and people were really excited to see it. And we were busy pretty well right off the bat, if you recall. We had large groups that had been waiting, and it took us a while to adjust, but it was really a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But again, it came back to the people in my eyes, and I think that our business, whether it's luxury or not luxury, is really defined by how we execute and how we engage with the customer. It's something I've always carried with me, and something I really learned a lot from my days with Four Seasons back in the day.
I was in college when I started. I was super green, and to the leadership that you and CBH and others to bring along this group of people. I think I was like employee number 50 and we grew to 1,200 or something while I was there. And to get them aligned, to be able to deliver these really amazing guest experiences, it was something spectacular in culture, in leadership, in a vision. And it really was like a foundation for me for the rest of my career as well.
Oh, for sure.
You were probably coming off this high, right? And then Aviara, and really just great success, continued success. And you made a big decision to leave an organization that I know a lot of your heart was part of. Can you maybe share that? Because that probably took some courage.
It did. And actually, that was, I think, one of my first courageous moments, which I actually didn't put in my note to you. But I think that I felt a bit pigeonholed, not because I didn't love the people I was with, but it was really about the way the company worked, right? Like you had to do 2 or 3 of the same roles before you got promoted. And that often entailed moving, which was fine with us because we had done it a fair bit. But I really felt like there was a big world out there. And I think that, I don't know what prompted it, aside from, look, I'm just anxious. I've got to do better with my family. I've got to get on to that next position. And maybe it was a little premature in my eyes because I ended up having just a different experience outside of Four Seasons. And I think when you leave that cocoon of a world-class brand like that, you really do experience some hardships. But it was really about just growing my skill set and maybe not being given all of the comforts of home, as I call it, in my next job. And I don't regret it. One of the journeys that I had after I had left, obviously, soon after I left, I ended up in Las Vegas, which was a whole different ballgame. And I didn't know what I was going to walk into. For that was really a cost of living thing. And for us, we were able to buy a home and provide for our family in a different way. You quickly realize that their priorities are very different, right? It's not about taking care of the client from a luxury perspective. It's about gaming. It's about the whole package. Now that's come full circle in the last 20 some odd years, but that was a tough gig. And then we decided that, look, this is not where we want to raise our family. I ended up going back to traditional luxury with Ritz-Carlton after that, which was a good move. And that wasn't an opening hotel, but that first step away from Four Seasons was really about just seeing what else was out there and seeing if I had the muscles to survive without that protection of that umbrella brand. And it was very parochial in many ways, where I knew everybody, I knew all the senior people. It was a politically charged company too, where you had to wait your turn. And that was fine for most people. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And to this day, though, some of my best friends are still, though, alumni or still with the company. And I think what was unique, and I think someone said it to me recently, was like, what was special when the company was small is that we all came together and thought the same way about service and culture. And that was a simple statement, but it was something that I've always remembered. And that's what alignment really comes down to. And I think that it's hard to get that. And honestly, I think they're struggling a bit now because they're so big. It's 130 hotels and there's not enough people to keep that storytelling alive just through internal transfer. So they're having to rely on outside bench strength. And, sometimes it gets lost. But it was great. I don't regret those 10 years at all. I look back and I ended up doing 5 hotels in 10 years, which was rare. We moved a lot and that was tough on the family, but I don't regret it in any shape or form. And really, yeah, you're right. That was probably my first sort of courageous decision, was to make that move away from the mothership, as I used to call it.
I describe culture like at a brand like Four Seasons, that if you do something on behalf of a guest, if you go out of your way to create an incredible experience, or if you pick up the trash on the floor, you're going to be supported in the organization. The culture is so strong. And when we were hiring, if you weren't someone who was willing to pick up the trash on the floor or hold the door for someone, regardless of your level of responsibility, like you weren't going to be a culture fit. That's what a strong culture was. Like you didn't have to say it. It was just people knew what they'd be rewarded for and what we were there to do. And so really powerful. So you leave, you go to Vegas, you're at the Ritz. I know you've actually done some really exciting things. And I know you have your own firm now, but you did this before. So maybe share a little bit about that.
But it's funny. I was always a person in class that never raised their hand and always took the safe route by not speaking, right? And just following the leader. And if that meant in a job environment to just collect a paycheck every 2 weeks, that was what was comforting to me. And that was my early days. And I felt comfortable with that. And I always looked for a full-time job. And then in late '08, I had opened the Grand Del Mar, obviously beautiful property. Again, very different from Four Seasons, where we had a very hands-on owner that really, his DNA was all over the place, whether it was aesthetic or the food we served to the people we hired, which was tough sometimes because we often compromised, I felt, because we had to. We didn't really have a choice. But that was another exercise in learning to adapt. It wasn't a bad thing. And I knew it in taking the job that it would be quite the roller coaster with him. And so in late '08, obviously financial crisis was looming. I think, again, meltdown that we hadn't seen before with housing and financial institutions. It was tough. And I had been approached in the fall of that year about, hey, can you help with this workout? This resort in Scottsdale. Oh, by the way, I need some help here at Terranea. And I said, look, I'm busy. I have a full-time job. And long story short, I could read through the tea leaves that my role was going to be jeopardized. And they told me that. It gave me a lot of notice. And I was lucky I didn't have to start from scratch, but I didn't want to just take on a project. I wanted to create an identity for what, I was all about and what my company was all about. And so what I did learn along the way, doing the openings I had done up to that point, was that independent owners don't have the luxury of a Four Seasons. They don't have the ability to call the home office and say, look, we need 20 people to help in these different areas, whether it's in food and beverage or in IT or rooms or in housekeeping. We're kind of doing this on our own. And so what I realized is these owners didn't have the resources to just pick up a phone. It meant calling friends, calling colleagues. Do you know of a consultant that can do IT? Do you know of a food and beverage restaurant consultant that can help us with the layout and training and this and that? So I said, why not start an organization or a company where I could really do one-stop shop for all of these owners, where I can provide staff if needed. I can write a pro forma and a business plan. I really just became their guide through the whole pre-opening journey, which is volatile to start. A lot of these owners have a lot invested financially. Some of them have guaranteed their loans with personal assets and banks breathing down their neck. And more importantly, they're anxious to get it open and get money coming in the door. So really my focus was to help independent owners and developers who maybe didn't know the business very well. And some were wealthy, some were not. But I also realized that even small companies that had some bench strength didn't really know how to do it right because they just fell upon these transitions. That's really been my elevator pitch. I help owners, developers, and senior leaders with sort of new builds, transitions, and strategic planning. And that's taken me down a few rabbit holes. Occasionally, I've ended up running a place for them because they said, look, we don't have anyone. Can you do that? And then it becomes comfortable, right? But then you realize, wait a minute, why am I doing this? I don't want to stay here forever. But it sometimes takes a year to get a place repositioned and get the right people in the right seats, to get the branding done, to just tweak things along the way. So it's really been fascinating for me personally to watch this journey where I've had to morph into whatever the client wanted me to be, but at the same time, stay true to what my mission was to help them turn this around. And so I don't really look back too far. Yes, it was a necessity because I wanted to obviously make a living. But when I was informed that, hey, this is going to happen, I didn't freak out. And, I knew I had these other projects in the pipeline, but some of it was a reach for me. The asset management role I took on initially when I started the firm was new for me because I never worked on that side of the table with a bank group that was institutional in nature and actually was about to foreclose on the owner that we were working with. And so I was a relationship guy, right? I liked the GM, I liked the director of sales and marketing, I liked the owner actually. And to know in my back of my head that something not so good was going to happen where they were going to take his hotel from them was a tough thing for me to go into these meetings knowing that this was about to happen. And look, I developed a bridge with the property team and we're able to retweak the strategies and we're able to turn the resort around. But it's been a fascinating journey for me. And people said, weren't you nervous? I said, I guess I was. And there's been some tough moments where you've got to find an assignment before the one you're working on ends, right? And you've got to spend a portion of your day on business development versus just doing the work. And you often take on more work than you can handle when you get it because you may not have it for a couple of months. So those have been adjustments for me, for my family. That was probably the most courageous change I made in my career. But what's happened, which is funny, is I've done this for quite a while. And along the way, I ended up taking on some full-time roles by keeping this advisory piece alive. But when I found myself purely just sitting in a small hotel, as I just did in the operations side, I really found myself yearning to have that freedom and the openness to explore new projects and meet with new people. And I don't regret it because my last role I really took on with the intent of getting it open, repositioning it, and then saying, here you go, and going from there. And actually my wife said, how long are you going to do this for? Because she knew I could do more. And here I am, I would say the last couple of innings in my career, relaunching the firm in a way, but I'm going to do it differently. And I think this time around, here we are again with a weird macroeconomic environment, right? As of today, if you watch too much of the news, it's depressing, but just a lot of uncertainty. But I really believe uncertainty is when people with talent, people with experience are needed to help hold the owner's hand or help an organization with high level of guidance and say, look, I've seen this before, it'll pass, and here's what we're going to do about it. I think it's been not an easy road, and sometimes it's been hard for people to understand my career path. And people ask me, like, what is this? So you have a full-time job and you do this? I said, yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. Because I've always had a full-time role in the last few years and then also had my advisory firm. So I've worn 2 or 3 hats, not similar to what you're doing, right? I think as an entrepreneur, you fit in where you can fit in. And so for us as a family, there's been some times like this is going to be tough, but then there's times where it's really rewarding. And so I don't regret it. I wouldn't have done the things I've done had I not ventured away from Four Seasons back in the day. I do envy some of my colleagues who have this comfortable life. I really didn't have a desire to go to Azerbaijan or wherever else, or Egypt or wherever else they would have sent me, even though it would have been an amazing experience. That wasn't in the cards for us as a family. But I think courageous choices you make at many stages in your life, right? You do it early when you can experiment and not have a lot at risk. And I think you do it later where you have the confidence to say, look, I've seen this and done this before. I'm going to do it again. And I would even say that my last full-time job, which I left a few weeks ago, was a courageous choice to go back on property, knowing how I would feel after a couple of years and how cumbersome it is to manage just the day-to-day of employee relations and wage and hour issues and in our world. And I think it took me a while to figure out like, why is this so exhausting? But it has changed. The workforce has changed. The rules have changed. And I think a lot for the good for the employees. But as a leader, when you're trying to fulfill the needs of an owner or your management team, it takes a lot out of you. And unfortunately, my style is not to be removed. I was there 6 days a week and for a good 2 years. And I guess I felt good that I could still do it. And I guess, I don't know, maybe that's why I did it in the first place. Part of it was to get back to something unique and different and luxury. And it's helped me now as I'm chatting with clients about project work. We go, yeah, I've heard of that place. But I think every experience you go through is like that, right? You collect these experiences as you go along.
There's all these shows now like The Fixer or the guy who comes in because you've had this experience across multiple brands and points of service and things like that. And you basically know what good looks like. So you can help diagnose like where the biggest opportunities are and prioritize whether it's the owner or the group's objectives, because they might have different things that they're trying to achieve from a strategic perspective or a service delivery or whatever their goals are. But your experience at a holistic management, financial, and then all the different, whether it's F&B or rooms, or like you did all the things, the different kind of levers that can be pulled. And I think that's so powerful, not only in hospitality, but even broader when you're thinking about lots of different kinds of businesses, really helping be that go walk side by side with the business owner to help them diagnose and then create a prioritized strategy to get them where they want to go.
For me now, I think understanding the environment that we're walking into, I think particularly in California and many other cities in the US, it's how do you do more with less? And that's really the message of the day. I think that we're all reading about these wage ordinances and everyone's complaining about it, but the reality is coming fast and furious. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's in Florida, and this type of stuff doesn't exist, right? Next January, we're going to have servers making $25 an hour. It doesn't mean they're bad people. They actually probably deserve that $25 an hour. But how do you then make sure there's a job for them? And how do you make your business profitable? So those things are front and center. But more importantly, I think changing the paradigm of what is expected of someone in this hospitality field is something that I'm passionate about, trying to educate people, because people come out of hotel schools, and I think you can attest to this. I think you had some colleagues that thought they should be the GM because they went to a certain school, and it doesn't make a difference. Hospitality is like the ultimate equalizer, and teaching even to this day kids that is not easy. I have a 29-year-old who just took on his first hotel job and only been there a month. He's already saying, I don't make enough money. I said, why don't you give it more than 30 days and see if you get promoted or they give you a raise or do something, right? But that's the generation that we're living in. But I think the owners need to understand that too. And I think that they complain about why my place is not working. And it really comes down to you have the wrong people on the wrong seats. And you've got to have a level of selfness as a leader. And teaching that is something I want to do. I look back on, like I said, some of my colleagues who've flown in a straight line with Four Seasons or Ritz or whatever, and they've got this pedigree and all of that, but they haven't really seen the world. And I don't mean like geographically, but just they would never work with an owner with a Best Western or a Hilton Garden Inn. And what I did realize in doing that type of work with some of my roles is that those leaders need help more than anyone else, because a general manager in a hotel with no staff is doing 9 jobs. And that's where they need the guidance and the help. And you have to want to do it. When I took on this role as a vice president of operations, and some of the hotels I had were not very good or glamorous, but I quickly realized that some of those people that worked there were really special and they cared deeply for what they were doing. And I've also realized that no one's going to remember me for where I worked. It's the impact I've made on their careers. And I'm at the stage now where I have to make a decision as to what the next 5 years looks like. And I've had a lot of my colleagues that said, why are you still grinding away like this? I said, I like what I do ultimately, but I think there's a place for it right now. And I haven't ever been so removed from operations that I can't do it. But yeah, in talking to you, it's made me realize that you go through these inflection points in your career and your life. And at each of those is an opportunity to make a courageous choice. And I'm at that point now, actually, where even my wife's saying, look, I think you can do more than just run some little hotel somewhere. I think you got to figure this out. Chatting with you and reconnecting with you. And then I was with my friend Eric today and talking about rebuilding my brand. And he goes, look, I got it. I know what I need you to look like. So what I look like? He goes, no, that's not what I mean. He goes, I know how virtually I'm going to present you. And he goes, do you have like jeans? I said, yeah. And you gave me like a little snippet of what he wants to do, which he hasn't told me the whole thing yet. But so I want to have some fun with it, right? I'm going to make a courageous choice to keep doing what I'm doing on my own and have faith. And you look around in our society, the ones that are really affluent and wealthy and really living life to its fullest are the ones that took risks, right? I'm not saying I'm going to be another Elon Musk or Bill Gates or any of that, but entrepreneurship comes with sort of some ground rules. And one of those rules is you got to have a strong backbone and have faith in yourself. I think that's one thing I've learned along the way, because I didn't really have that. I always took the easy route, right? Oh, I got to go take this job. Then when you apply, you go, why am I doing this? Sounds terrible. Right. And I've had a couple of those moments in the last few weeks. Right. And I said, look, I don't want to do this. And I've been fortunate that a couple of things have come my way, and I'm going to keep plodding along and making those choices.
I'm so excited to see your continued journey. And I know that having impact, you started this by saying it's the people and it's the relationship, and really having that impact, regardless of whether it's under a brand or not, is really exciting. So I'm excited to keep seeing that. Just before we conclude, we have a lot of people that maybe early career, like both of our kids that are in their 20s or whatever. And what word of advice do you have for a leader who wants to have an impact in their career?
I think the biggest thing, and I've been saying this recently to our kids, is you got to find something you love to do. And it took us a while as parents to not put our conditions on our kids, because I've got 4 that are in their 20s, and the 2 bookends, my youngest and my oldest, are not ever going to go to college. And I'm good with that. And our message has been just find something you love to do. And I think that it's not about college anymore. It's about a passion, something you're passionate about. And if you're not passionate about it, get out of it and go find something else. And it could be a manual job, meaning physical labor, or it could be something more intellectually stimulating. Find your passion, because it's getting lost, that message, right? With the pressures that young people have, whether it's in hospitality or whatever, hey, you got to work for the right firm. You got to have the right degree. And they try that route and then they're super frustrated. It's like, well, this isn't working. And some of them are coming out of school with like giant debt. And I can't even imagine that pressure. Our kids have a little bit because we thought it was important that they have some skin in the game. But like some of the numbers I hear, like 100,000, 200,000, that's just shocking to me. And no one's going to forgive that. So you better be ready. And maybe it's best to just take a year off and go find some random roles that you want to experiment with, because that's the other thing society doesn't encourage, is experimentation. So I think that I've learned from my youngest and oldest that one's a dancer, she's the youngest, and works in 4 different jobs, and we don't talk to her about that. She's realized that to pay her bills. And then my oldest, who's tried a bunch of things and knows he won't do anything with mainstream, but he needs to find something that fuels his passion. So I would just say, find something you really love to do and be passionate about it, because there's so many people. Like technology right now has laid off so many people. And I always think, what are these people going to do? Also ask, do they really like what they were doing at LinkedIn or Microsoft or wherever, right? So I think that would be my message. And certainly in hospitality, it's not easier. So you've got to find people that have that passion.
I love that. Find your passion. It's where each of our magic sits when we work within that. And I agree with you. It's that incremental breadcrumb, right? Follow the thing and just do more of what you like and less of what you don't as you go. And that was what leads us on our journey. Thank you so much, Vikram. I really appreciate you being with us on this episode. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of The Courageous Choice.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.